call to order the workshop meeting of the Council Bluffs Community School District Board of Education. Mr. Ostrowski, please call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Arthur.
Present.
Ms. Shudak.
Here.
Mr. Kozier.
Present.
Mr. Tripp.
Here.
Ms. Myers.
Here.
Mr. Peters.
Here.
And Mr. LaFurla.
Present. Now please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, we have approval of our agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Have a motion, a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the agenda has been approved. And before us now is approval of the work session and workshop business meetings of August 22nd, 2023. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll move we approve the minutes of the work session and workshop business meetings of August 22nd, 2023 as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the minutes have been approved. Next is public participation. Excuse me. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board regarding agenda items or other matters of concern. And I'm getting a no head shake, so we did not receive any requests this evening. So that brings us to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. LaFurla. We have two categories of presentations this evening. Our first is our student achievement, and the second is our informal presentations. At this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Matthews and Ms. Comine to the podium. We will be presenting on our Diploma Plus One and advanced course enrollment. We are always very excited about the achievement and the growth taking place among our students. So I look forward to this presentation, and I hope that the board can definitely recognize the growth and the work that's taking place. So Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Dr. Murillo. Good evening.
Good evening.
It's my absolute pleasure to provide an overview of our 2022-23 advanced course enrollments at TJ and AL, and then Ms. Comine will share where we are with our 2023-24 enrollments, as well as that final recap of our Diploma Plus One for the graduating class of 2023. As a reminder, this work is directly aligned to Strategic Goal 2, which is to guarantee each graduate is future ready. We know the role that the advanced courses play in obtaining that Diploma Plus One is critical. Without those concurrent enrollment and advanced placement classes, students wouldn't have the opportunities to obtain those college credits, which allow them to achieve so many of our Diploma Plus Ones. So we'll jump right into the data. This first graph shows the overall advanced course enrollment. So this includes both advanced placement courses as well as concurrent enrollment courses. Both of those are rigorous college level courses. There are just some distinguishing factors between the two, but I thought it was important to see overall that look as a district of where our enrollments have been in the two combined. And you can see that we have had a nice steady increase the last couple of years after the pandemic when we saw that slight drop in the 2021 year. We're really proud to say that we've had more enrollments this last year than any other year, with 3,387 enrollments in advanced courses. That is over 200 more than the year before. When we pull these out and look at advanced placement and concurrent enrollment separately, I'm going to show you first advanced placement. And what might catch your eye is kind of that stair step downward. And I just wanted to explain that in a couple of graphs you're going to see on concurrent enrollment, in those same places where we see AP going down, we see concurrent enrollment going up. And that's pretty natural. Students are choosing which of these college level credits they're taking, and it's pretty natural that they might take a concurrent enrollment class and then not take an AP, but overall that enrollment combined is holding steady and increasing. So I did want to point that out. I also wanted to point out that we had another nice increase here in the advanced placement classes. We went from 553 the year prior to 629 last school year. I'm really proud of the multiple opportunities we have for advanced placement in a variety of content areas. We have some examples are like music theory we can take as an AP class. We have Lang and Comp, Lit and Comp. We have physics and chem and biology, so we're getting the science strands, as well as psychology, geography, U.S. and world history. So a wide variety of offerings, and we had another teacher this year choose to take some additional training in Iowa City to make sure that he felt really equipped to teach another AP class. So we're just proud of continuing to provide these robust and rigorous opportunities for students. When students take advanced placement courses, they then have a decision of whether or not they want to take an AP exam. So I wanted to share the data around the AP exam as well. So you'll see 3 different lines there: the total number of exams, the total number of test takers, and then our pass rate. And what I really wanted to point out here is that we saw increases in the total number of exams taken and the total number of students taking those exams, which is really great. And our pass rate has stayed about the same. So a greater number of students were able to take these exams and pass these exams because we had a greater N there, even though that percentage stayed about the same. So we're very pleased to see that students are taking advantage of that opportunity and earning that college credit through those very challenging AP exams. So as promised, then I pulled out the concurrent enrollment data separately, and here you should notice those stair steps going up where you saw the AP ones going down on the chart a couple of graphs ago. Especially again, these last 2 years, we saw really nice increases there. These concurrent enrollment classes include our high school initiated concurrent enrollment classes where our own teachers are teaching them within the walls of our high schools, as well as the online courses they're taking through Iowa Western Community College and DMACC, and those they're taking on Iowa Western's campus. Regardless of how they take them, they all have to be held to the same standard. Our teachers have to be vetted by the community college. They have to have at least a master's degree plus additional hours in their content area. They have a liaison with the community college that ensures they are meeting those same rigorous high academic standards. So I just wanted to note how challenging and difficult these courses are, and how pleased and proud I am of our high school teachers for taking them on, and then those students for wanting to pursue that academic excellence as well. We had 2,758 concurrent enrollment course enrollments last year, which is really incredible. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Comine to talk a little bit more about the excitement around Diploma Plus One.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. This slide shows our district trend of Diploma Plus One credentials earned by our graduating seniors over the past 2 school years. During the 21-22 school year, 73% of our graduating seniors earned a second credential, and last school year we had 81% of our graduating seniors earn a second credential. As you can see, our data is strong and shows an upward trend in the number of students earning a credential in most areas. I'd like to highlight the increase in the number of students earning a seal of biliteracy. A seal of biliteracy is a nationally recognized award given to students who have attained proficiency in 2 or more languages, one of which is English, by their high school graduation. Last school year, we were able to offer our students the STAMP assessment for the first time instead of administering the advanced placement Spanish test for the seal of biliteracy. The change in assessment allowed for more flexibility in administering the assessment and how often the assessment could be given. So that provided our students with more opportunities to take the assessment, whereas the advanced placement Spanish assessment was confined to 1 designated time per year. Both the STAMP and the advanced placement assessment are rigorous assessments and measure competency at the college level. We also saw a significant increase in the number of students earning a credential in the career and academic pathway. This was due to an increase in students earning a second credential in health sciences, emerging technologies, and the addition of our first graduating class in early childhood education. We also added the OSHA 10 credential in our TradeWorks Academy last school year. OSHA 10 provides vital workplace safety and health information to entry-level workers in construction and general industry. It is a common requirement for employment in construction and other industries, as well as at the post-secondary level. This slide shows our comprehensive Diploma Plus One pathway enrollment by student count that will lead to completion by senior year. It does not include all of the Diploma Plus One opportunities offered to our students or those students who have already obtained their second credential. The college credit acceleration number has an asterisk by it, as the number 501 represents the number of students enrolled in one or more concurrent enrollment courses that are not part of another Diploma Plus One pathway. It does not necessarily represent that 501 students have chosen the college credit acceleration pathway. Overall, these student count numbers continue to support our district's upward trend in having more students participate in concurrent enrollment courses in Diploma Plus One pathways to graduate with a second credential by their senior year. We are super excited that we have 3 new pathways that we started this school year. Aviation Science will start the second semester. We have 47 students currently enrolled in the STEM concentrator. And we have 2 first-year classes of biomedical sciences, one at TJ and one at AL, with a total of 48 students. Dr. Matthews and I are willing to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I had one. I remember at the last graduation, so I was sitting there, was struck by the, let me take that all back. I think this is all wonderful. Very great job. And I'm so excited to see the engagement. But at that, I was struck by the numbers of students with D+1 credentials on the AL's campus, or students versus TJ. And it was much greater this year. And I don't know if that was AL was concentrating more on making sure those students took those tests, took those requirements to get that credential, and TJ hadn't because of all the turnover and things you've had, TJ, or exactly what was going on there, if that's something we track, how do we coach about that, all those questions.
So 2 years ago, when we had 73% of our students graduate with a second credential, TJ had more students graduate with a Diploma Plus One and a higher percentage than AL. They're the school that kind of pulled us up. Last year, AL did have a higher Diploma Plus One rate, but both of the schools are within 4 percentage points of each other. And so they are pretty close. We don't see a huge overall difference between the 2 schools.
Is it possible there's more kids there that just maybe dip into other things? So we just saw there's so many kids would stand up. I don't know if you remember that. And just number that had this, number that had this. It was just a dramatic number. It was stand up each time. Maybe
No,
they're
the
getting
number-
too, yeah, well, maybe they're just overlapping other things. Maybe they're lazy. Yeah. What is court
So
say?
we did, AL did have a higher number of students who passed the ACT National Career Readiness Certificate.
so-
And then there was a little bit of a blip last year with TJ where the cords for some of their students were not delivered in time. And so some of the students were a little nervous if they wanted to stand up or not. So I'm just thinking back to some of the things that may have maybe created that mirage.
We're feeling that the focus is the same
The focus, yes.
across the high schools we're focusing
Yeah.
on.
To ensure that that's occurring, Melissa has started meeting with the counselors, high school counselors together. She still spends time with them individually at both schools, when I say individually, a TJ counseling meeting, but to ensure that both have access, both have the same information, and that we're pushing forward, because really what we want to see is start to trickle down, with the redesign of the middle schools into the middle school, so our students come in with those experiences looking for where they want to plug in. But I know that we are tracking now to ensure that where the numbers are and reaching out to students. And I also know, Mr. Arthur, that we have some students that didn't show up for graduation at TJ, because we had one that had a excellent a pathway, and I was waiting for him to stand up. He didn't, he decided not to walk. So we have students too, and he was from TJ. So I think it is, the eyesight may have looked that way, but we are looking to make sure there's equity and that our students are engaged and that our counselors, our teachers, and our administration is ensuring that, yeah, there's an alignment.
We also are ensuring when teachers are retiring, if they were teaching concurrent enrollment classes, we're trying to recruit to replace at the same level. We've worked really closely with human resources on that. Or if they're teaching some of our other CE courses, we're getting them trained. We had to go to Project Lead the Way training from TJ this summer so that we could increase our STEM concentrator offerings there as well. So we're very mindful of that.
Do you guys see any trends between the two high schools, like certain schools or certain demographics going towards certain pathways? I don't know if that's something you track, or is it a pretty mixed bag across?
Like Dr. Merlo said, we do do a lot of tracking, and I mean, honestly, our kids are loving these +1 pathways. And any type of conversation or surveys that we have with students, and we actually did one of the high schools at the end of last year just to kind of get some input, and every student said they loved the +1 pathways. And so we just are constantly filling all of our seats out at Iowa Western for the pathways. And so usually our concern is, are there going to be enough seats for all of our students? That's usually the concern that our coordinator of college, career, and technical education and I have, and not the other way around.
Mr. Tripp, I won't say I'm a feminist, but I can tell you I track to see how many females are in which pathway.
Well, that's what I was kind of wondering, like, the different demographics.
Yes,
do
we
have
look at the subgroups, and,
subgroups
yes,
going
yes.
specific pathways that we're seeing a trend?
In fact, I got to present to a women's group in Omaha and I included, and Melissa and Kathy really helped me with the data to show how many females are in each one of our pathways. I think it's important that we see what their interest is. If we have a pathway that doesn't have a high interest, we need to, evaluate, is that a pathway we want to continue, or how do we level it up? Yeah.
Looking at males, females, we typically have more males enter trade works and more females enter our health sciences.
Go ahead.
I just had a very quick question on the AP classes. You talked about how the advanced placement courses over the years are seeing just a slight dip. Were there any classes that were at risk of possibly being, canceled or removed because of lack of student interest, or was everything able to run?
We haven't removed any that I can recall right now, but sometimes we do have course requests and we don't fill a section. We keep it in our course catalog to continue offering it. That's true of any course,
Okay.
but they're typically pretty well enrolled.
I have a question about the aviation sciences, just because I was excited to hear a student brought that forth last year. Do you guys have like an anticipated number of interested students, or how do you keep that interest peak since it starts semester 2?
So we did, as Dr. Matthew mentioned, we had teachers trained this past summer, and so we're going to offer the course second semester at AL, and the teacher has received all the materials and has been working with the counselors the past 2 weeks to go ahead and start a recruitment plan for that. But we do plan on filling one class to start that particular pathway.
I would say add just the graduation, the pre-graduation from Iowa Western that we attended was just amazing and wonderful. It was, I wish the community could see that with the number of kids that we had that were coming forward through Iowa Western before they graduated from us.
And just a little highlight, remember that the purpose of that is to honor our seniors who are graduating with a diploma +1 before they walk across the stage. But we also have juniors who have graduated who aren't part of that. And so the numbers are actually higher than the 107 students that you saw at that ceremony last May.
I forget the numbers that you showed, but the college credit acceleration numbers are extremely high, and I know they're duplicated, but to tell me if this is true, the majority of the college credit courses offered that we're counting in the 501, those are being offered in our high schools for college credit. Is that true, or is it, I know it's probably a mix, but,
It's all. And that's 501 students that are taking concurrent enrollment. And so the number of concurrent enrollment classes that those 501 students are taking is over 1,000.
Right.
I don't remember if it's 1,200 or 300, but those are sitting outside of our pathways.
Right.
And we have some freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors who participate in concurrent enrollment. And so it's kind of hard to tell the exact number of students who have chosen the college credit acceleration, because it is, our kids are taking advantage of that for 4 years.
yeah, and that's fine. I assume that was the case. I guess I was just getting, my question is more to, how many of these college credit offerings are happening in our high schools versus, in that 501, how many of those course offerings are they taking at the college? Because I know I'm assuming it's possible for a student who wants to earn an Associate of Arts degree from iWestern without ever stepping foot on that campus. And if that's the case, do our counseling offices have, sort of a schedule of courses and a layout of those courses to,
Make that possible.
to advise a student from freshman to senior year? We've been doing that all along. I know that. I just wondered if now it's more coordinated.
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
Our counselors used to do one-on meeting with our students every year, and then last year we switched to two. They do one in the fall and spring. The fall is focused completely on their Diploma Plus One, and then the spring is on Diploma Plus One and also getting ready for their following school year. Last year we had 11 students that walked across the stage as seniors who earned their associate's degree while they were on the high school campus. And so not only are our counselors aware, but our students are aware. And
I just know how popular Early College Academy is. And we're so limited in the number of students that we can serve, and there's a lot of reasons why. But that's still possible to earn an
Still possible.
associate's
It is,
degree
yeah.
without being a part of that program.
And we do have that mapped out.
Yeah.
We do.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for our next presentation, it was real important to us this summer as the cabinet got together for our 2-day retreat. And one of the things that we always look at is our goals and our strategic goals for the district. And we find the goals really important to us because the strategic goals stretch us, inform us, allow us to track data of what we believe is important to us. But it also allows us the ability to be nimble and to pivot and have some flexibility as we continue on this focus of our goals. When we got into our goals and we started looking at academic achievement, which will always be our first goal, and then our making post-secondary inescapable for all students, that's kind of our North Star, I'd say, our Diploma Plus One. When we got to Goal 3, as you'll hear tonight in a little more conversation, we felt like Goal 3 was time to retire it because it was about facilities. And we had really come to the end of that facilities, and we started talking about if we're preparing students to have that Diploma Plus One, what should Goal 3 look like? How do we focus on that? And from that, thank you, we began to talk about transitions, and we began to look at the research, and we started reading articles about it, and knowing how important the research says that the transition for students entering 6th and 9th grade is to their setting them up for success. And so Goal 3, you'll hear a little more conversation around the why. And then we felt like our social and emotional support for students, that students feel supported and connected, that we can't pivot from that. So we really kind of refined that, especially around some of the legislation that was passed. We knew there were some changes that we had to make to Goal 4. Still knowing, though, how important it was that we supported our students. So at this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Matthews, who's going to do goal 1, and then Ms. Colmine's going to do 2 and 3, and then Mr. Hamilton is going to conclude our presentation with goal 4. So, Dr. Matthews?
Thank you. And hello again. So as Dr. Murillo mentioned, these strategic goals really do guide all of our work, and we wanted to take a really good look at the data we had around the goals to see that we were measuring the right outcomes. And when we looked at improving academic achievement, we wanted to keep those same 3 metrics around MAP proficiency, MAP growth targets, and overall growth in MAP, but we needed to look at those indicators a little more carefully. When we set these goals originally, we didn't have historical data, we didn't have longitudinal data to see what is our current level of proficiency, how much proficiency increase should we expect to see over the course of each year, what should that incremental change be. So we really wanted to look at that trend data as we analyzed where our goals should be. So in looking at that first metric, we are looking at, for both MAP, math, and reading, the percentage of students, again, who will score in those top 3 bands, average, or high. As a reminder, there are 5 bands for MAP that students can be placed in. So we have the low and the low average in addition to the 3 you see here. And when you have a norm reference test and those students are evenly distributed among those bands, with 100% of students in 5 bands, there should be 20% of students in each band. Across the nation, every student who takes this assessment, that's how they'll fall on the 5 bands. So in those top 3, we should expect to see 60%, and that's what we're approaching. That's our first goal for this year, is 2024. 60% of our students will be in those top 3 bands. And then we really wanted to continue to stretch ourselves with those 5% incremental changes. So we know evenly distributed, we should see 60% in those top 3, but we want more than that for our students. So we're going to keep pushing to get to that 65% in 2025 and that 70% in 2026. And some of you are probably sitting there wondering, aren't some of our schools or some of our teachers or some of our students already above this? So the answer is yes. Law of averages is, about half of our schools are going to be above the district average and half are going to be below the district average. So we worked with Dr. Shudak, and he developed a nice formula that principals could use then to inform their school improvement plans and their own goals to say, this is where my school currently is. This is the percentage increase that we should have to contribute to this 60% average, this 65% average, this 70% average for the district. And then principals then were also able to use that same tool as individual teachers are setting their own goals for their classrooms based on their students' performance, knowing if I already have 70%, this is the percent that I need to increase to make sure that I'm keeping pace with that district trend and that district average. We decided to keep the last 2 metrics the same, so 60% of students achieving those individual growth targets. Again, MAP says 50% will and 50% won't. We want to stretch ourselves to that 60% because we're already hovering or just over that 50%. We want to keep pushing for 60%, meeting those growth targets from fall to spring. And then we still believe very much that all students can and will grow, so we still have that last goal of 100% of students showing some growth on the MAP assessments. So that explains the updates to our first goal, and then Ms. Colmine will talk to you about goals 2 and 3.
So as you're aware, and from the previous presentation, that goal 2 is to guarantee each graduate is future ready. The goal is targeted toward our Diploma Plus One pathways and opportunities to ensure that post-secondary education is inescapable for all. Last year's metric was to have 80% of our graduating seniors earn a second credential, and as you're aware, we exceeded that goal and had 81% of our seniors graduate with a second credential. We believe that the annual goals set for the next 3 graduating classes are realistic, and that they will also continue to stretch us toward achieving more to eventually hit that 100% beyond 2026. So for the 2024 graduating class, our goal is to have 85% of graduating seniors earn a high school diploma and second credential. In 2025, the goal is 90%, and in 2026, the goal is 95%. Goal 3 is new this school year and focuses on providing a successful transition for students entering 6th and 9th grade. During our end of the year data roundtables with Dr. Murillo, select cabinet members, and our elementary, middle, and high school principals, we discussed strategies for a successful transition into 6th and 9th grade. And the information and discussion that we had with our principals at that time was very compelling. So as a cabinet, we decided to take the topic to our executive cabinet retreat this past July. And during the retreat, we spent a large amount of time discussing successful transitions from a district, school, and student perspective as it directly relates to being on track to graduate with a Diploma +1 for our students. Therefore, we made the decision to move forward and to continue to get secondary principal voices. So we met with secondary principals 3 times in August, and they provided us input. They actually helped us create, and they actually finalized Goal 3 with us. And then that allowed Dr. Murillo to share Goal 3 at our district-wide back-to-school celebration with all staff. What we know about successful transitions is that research consistently shows that an effective transition plan helps students successfully transition into their new school, become a part of the new school, but also maintain their academic, social, and emotional status. And an effective transition plan for 6th grade addresses the expectations that middle school students need to meet, but it also helps bridge what was expected of them in elementary school and what is expected of them in middle school. And it also considers the differences in the procedural, social, and academic changes that the students face when they enter middle school. For 9th graders, their freshman year could be a make it or break it year for high school. Course performance in the freshman year of high school is the most predictive indicator of whether a student will graduate or drop out of school. It is more predictive than race, ethnicity, poverty level, or prior test scores combined. When schools concentrate their efforts on helping students make a successful transition in 9th grade, it results in increases in graduation. The transition to 6th and 9th grade does not happen automatically on the first day of school or in the first month of school, and we recognize this, and so each school's transition plan has built in before the transition, during the transition, and after the transition. An example of a before school transition is a meeting where school counselors and administrators from all involved schools meet together to discuss the actual transition. The purpose of these meetings is to examine school data as a whole, but also individually, to collect narrative from all of those involved, and then to determine some needed strategies and support for individuals and groups and whole groups of students. Another example that was implemented this year at TJ was SOAR. That was a support transition to both not just our students, but also our teachers. Some examples of during and after transition activities. There are always extended advisement times during the first week of school with specific transition lessons and activities. A common one you're probably familiar with in 6th grade is, how do I open my locker? How do I find my classes? And then also one of the new ones this year is every 6th grade student in our middle schools received a student agenda. So learning how to use a student agenda throughout the day, and a school home connection was built in with that. And then, of course, ongoing and targeting lessons that include goal setting and grade checks during advisement and throughout the school day. Our counselors and our graduation coaches are instrumental in the transition. They do a variety of one-on-one check-ins with students and pull different small groups throughout the school year. We have various mentoring opportunities, and then, of course, our MTSS is extremely important. That has been aligned as well. So Goal 3 is embedded into each of our school improvement plans, and the data is reviewed at every school every 1 to 2 weeks. But then we also take a look at district-wide data as a cabinet and with our principals, and then they take it back to their leadership teams and their school teams. And that data is also reviewed on an ongoing basis throughout the school year as part of our On Track to Diploma +1 review. And now I will turn it over to Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you. Goal 4 has not changed. It's still our goal to ensure that each student in our district is supported and connected. The work that we're doing here is really enhanced with our multi-tiered system of supports that we're doing district-wide, that's implementing district-wide this year. We piloted that in a few schools, but the work that we're doing there really will enhance this goal. Like Dr. Murillo said, we did change a few of the data points just to meet the new legislation and to make sure we were falling in line there. So the 4 data points that we're really looking at is we want 100% of students to report that they have at least one caring adult at school. This is, I believe, our 3rd year doing that. We score right around 95% of our elementary students reporting that, and just above 80% of our secondary students reporting that. We believe we have a system and we have enough supports that 100% of our kids should say that they have at least one caring adult, whether that's a teacher, custodian, bus driver, somebody at school that really cares about them. The second point is 85% of students will report that they like school. We know that if kids like school, they're more likely to come to school and be engaged and do well. Right now, our elementary score is just above that 85%, and our secondary schools score in the mid-70s. Again, making school engaging, providing activities, providing that caring adult, all of these goals, data points work together to achieve the goal. 75% of secondary students will participate in extra co-curricular activities. You heard the report this summer from our activities directors. We're sitting at about 66% between the 2 high schools. Again, we're increasing our offerings that we have with clubs. We're increasing our coaches getting out and meeting with students. That number has gone up since the pandemic steadily. 75% is a stretch goal, but we know that we can get to that goal. And the last one is 80% of students will have an average daily attendance of at least 90%. This one is a little confusing. Chronic absenteeism is 10% of the school days. Studies will show that if kids miss less than 10% of school, they're far more likely to be successful. So we want 80% of our students to be at that non-chronic absent rate. Right now, again, we're scoring just below 78%. It's increased just over a percentage point every year since COVID. This is a battle that we have our graduation coaches, our student family advocates, our counselors, our teachers working with every day, re-engaging kids to be in school. Again, I think we'll be at 80% this year, and then we'll look to create that even higher moving forward. With that, I believe if you have any questions for any of us, now would be a good time.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Mr. Hamilton, when we removed the dysregulated language, was that just to simplify, to make sure reporting was aligned? I don't understand why that was.
They essentially said if we were going to ask surveys about kids' social emotional, that we had to get parent, not only just notify them, that we had to get parent permission, signed off permission, and we didn't feel like having to navigate that and decide who could take the survey, who couldn't take the survey, what parent signed off was going to be more work than what it was probably worth at that point, so we just removed it.
Okay, versus the ones we can more easily.
Yep.
Hear. Okay, thank you. Goal 2, D+1 changes. So we have, so it looks like we took a little step back from our earlier stretch goals. Was that just to enable us to better align resources and get better plans in place, or was that just an involvement realizing, hey, we want to be successful, let's show growth? Like, what was the reasoning? Just curious.
That's fine, yeah.
Again, as Dr. Matthews stated at the beginning when we talked about Goal 1, is having that longitudinal data so that we could track it. We didn't have any of that when we created the first. We also know that we have students in our specialized programs that do complete and get to walk on graduation day, but because they can stay in the program till they're 21, they are not counted as graduates. So therefore, we cannot count them. We also know that we have students that are need an additional year to graduate. And so 100%, we could still, felt like we could still say that, but making the realistic of what we would know we could really achieve is kind of where we went with those percentages. Instead of saying 100%, that's why we went 95, because we will have close to 5% that will either be a fifth-year graduate or in our specialized services classrooms.
So more of a, yeah, realistic.
Yeah, we went with what we really believe, so we could show the board and measure that. We really felt like these were closer to what we believe over time. Dr. Shudak had studied and kind of pulled together that data for us. And we kind of looked at it and said, do we want to continue to put the stretch out there, or would we like to be really honed in on where we believe we can be? That also took, I guess I'd say, let some air out of the balloon for our schools, because our schools were really struggling, saying, how am I going to get 100% when I can't count these kids? And I know Ms. Comine has been on the phone with the state saying, if we don't get to count these children as graduates, and then when they do graduate and when they turn 21, we still can't go back and put them in. It's kind of like we're not counting kids that did the work. So we're struggling also still with the DE on how we create the graduation rates, and it's something that's really on our radar right now because we don't think it's being, so we just felt like it would be a little more obtainable and our schools could see we can make that's achievable versus us stretching it so far where they'd be like, oh my gosh, we're never going to get that.
So what do credentials look like for a student who's struggled to graduate, or is legitimately so, at 21?
Yeah, like if they go to Canesville, there are still pathways that we're holding them to. If they're in the TAP program, we're still getting them the training so that they can get jobs while they're still going through the program here with us in Council Bluffs. But again, we cannot count that because they're not a graduate.
I know some of these students are also students who are in our specialized programs
That's
where they
right.
need extra care.
That's right.
But they're learning other life skills too.
They are. They're still going through, they're still getting that training, but they are not being able to be considered a graduate, or it excludes them from being able to stay in the program.
Do we have any pathways we show for them?
We do.
Any
We
additional
have
credentials
We
we show
do.
for those students?
We have our TAP program,
That's, we
Which is
combine it
life.
all under that?
life skills program.
Okay.
And
Source.
those certificates allow them to get jobs.
Right,
Because
right.
they go in with that, and
Right.
an
And they're doing
employer knows.
OJT training or
Yes.
job-alike training
Yes.
as
There's
they
a
get
continuum that
as they
go
age
through.
older, yeah.
Yes.
So if they're not counted as a graduate, are they counted in the population then?
They are. They're still in our number.
Percent.
Yeah. And
So
they're,
that percentage will never be accurate.
So we encourage families to come to Council Bluffs School District because we have an excellent specialized services program.
That is correct.
And we're penalized.
yes.
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 That makes sense.
Well, Ms. Colmine's had many conversations for me, and we're not done yet. So we're still after that one.
And then, can I ask another question? Okay. Goal 3, transitions.
Your time is up, Mr.
That's fine. The success plan for all students, I love that concept. Is there parental engagement portion of that?
So when I had mentioned the transition plans being written before the transition, during the transition, after the transition, the parent piece and component is woven through each of those. And so an example would be any type of parent night that occurs before the school year starts, where parents come in, like at the middle schools, they enter the schools in the spring, and they get to see a presentation, they get to see a tour, they get to learn about all the different offerings that they have. That would be an example. And then there are specialized, during the transition, after the transition, there are also special times where parents come in, but that is also sometimes when it's an individual student or a small group of students where those parents are a part of that process. An example which isn't a 9th grade one, but our 12th graders have a senior graduation meeting with every student and parent. That would be an example of how a parent would be
So
involved.
this would be in addition to any IEPs or 504s or anything else?
Yes. And the last bullet, we put that in there is because we wove our MTSS process throughout the transition plan. And that allows all students to receive supports, but then it allows targeted students to receive additional supports. And then we have intensive supports that can be offered. But then we also have the enrichment supports for students who are already performing above and beyond. And so MTSS is kind of like that nice cherry on top of the sundae. It just brings it all together to make sure we meet the needs of all students.
But Mr. Arthur, it's, the principals understand, it's my expectation that if they need a success plan, that our parents are in the loop. If there's students that are in that, I see Mr. Hamilton nodding his head, because if they get on that kind of radar where they need some support academically, or they're having trouble attending school or something, then we need the parent. We are a partner with our parents, and we need them. We need their support. So that is an expectation if we get to that third bullet. Parents are in the loop.
That could include outside agencies or anything else.
I was at a high school today, and they were sharing the results of their home visits, and sometimes they had to go to the home, and then sometimes the parents were in the school. They held a total of 13 within the past 2 weeks. Yeah.
And then, is this all, this is a Dr. Miller question, sorry. One more question.
This is your last one.
I believe that. You may want it to be. No, and this is during while we're also looking at the increase in academic rigor, changes and other things, as we're evaluating grading policies and all these other things too.
Yes, that is correct.
Perfect.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew they had.
Thanks for sending me those.
well, this is just to preface, going to be a stupid question, but because all of 4 of these goals are important, but I think most people look at the goals and say, oh, number 1 is slightly more important than the others. And if that is true, I just wonder if, should goal 4 be goal 1?
I mean, Mr. Hamilton's going to say
You
yes.
have to reprint
You don't
everything
mind.
anyway, so.
Mr.
That's true,
Hamilton.
you're laying the foundation.
The idea of all the work that we're doing, quite honestly, is that students achieve. So we're supporting students, whatever, through therapy, through counseling, or whatever it is that they need, so they can achieve. That's what a school district is here to do that. So I would say, being the person who's in charge of goal 4, the goal 1 is the most important goal, because if we do all the other goals, then they're going to achieve. So that's to me what it's all about.
Better than goal 2, which is guaranteeing their future ready.
They're all going to jockey for the.
I guess as we were
There's some sort of
thinking through those, it's just
horizontal line,
impossible
all
for me
goals.
to imagine a time where students, if we are not doing the work of making sure that students feel connected and feel supported, and that they're caring adults in their lives in our school buildings, how can we do any of the rest of the things? But like I said, I told you it was going to be a stupid question. I was looking at this printed document thinking, oh, we're going to have to reprint that. Well, if we're going to have to do that, maybe we want to change the order around just a little.
I think they're all equally important.
They are. I understand that.
They are all
And-
equally.
Yes.
I think you're bringing up something, so we talked about in the past about, do we have too many goals? We have too few goals. Do we have, are there some that should be a higher priority? But the cabinet agrees.
I've
all
always
these
felt
equally.
like if I can stand and have an elevator speech about my goals, and I can in turn talk to the staff and call out that goal, and then start to see the staff be able to have an elevator speech about the goal, and we all agree it is about our students achieving, our students graduating future ready. We're supporting the transitions to ensure the first 2. And by the way, we are so worried about the social and emotional part of every student in our schools. I mean, we can all speak the goals. We don't have to worry about them being paragraph long. We can synthesize them. We can walk around, we breathe them. If I had 8 goals, I don't know if I could do that, Mr. Arthur.
No.
If I had 2, I feel like I would be missing parts. And so we're trying to really hone in on, the reason goal 3 really came about was I wanted to make sure we're doing everything we can to ensure our students feel successful and connected. And so we're going to be intentional around our 6th grade and intentional around our freshmen. We want them to be successful and connected to our schools. And so I can't promise you that's going to turn this around and make a difference, but I can tell you, we're going to measure it. We've already got our dates down on our cabinet agendas of when we're going to look at the data all through the year. And so I just think it's one more piece of the puzzle that we got to bring forward and get after.
So do we have the right resources in 5th and 6th and in 9th, or 8th and 9th?
Well, I can tell you the
Make
5th
this
grade,
happen.
the principals of the elementary and the principals of the middle schools met at the end of last school year. It's almost like handing of the baton occurred. And I can tell you that if there's a need, that Mr. Hamilton's team is looking at what does that need look like and how do we fill that need. For our 8th grade, our middle school principals with our high school principals, they laid that out too. Here are students that are doing really, really well that need to be continue to push up. Here are students in the middle, and here are students that need to be kind of really have some wraparound services. Going in as they started this next level, our students and parents should know that we're having those conversations so that our principals have them on the radar, our counselors are watching, and then we can begin to provide that support when we see there's a need. And I don't know that we've ever been that intentional about the handoff, where our principals could say, here's some of the things that these students need. They really need somebody to be connected to them, to get them engaged. And this one has a lot of anxiety about coming into school. So what do we do? So that, we were very intentional.
Good place to focus.
You know, what a wonderful conversation. I wish we had media here.
It's almost like 4 pillars instead of 4 individual goals, and the 4 in the corner to keep the roof up and to keep the kids elevated up in the high. And I guess that's the way how I look at it is 4 pillars instead of 4 goals.
We call it that. We haven't printed the new one yet. So, Mr.
See what kind of conversation I started? Just keep the 4 goals the way they are. They're great. You guys did an amazing job.
Good. Thank you.
Sorry to muddy the waters.
And for our final presentation, Mr. LaFurla and board, we will be inviting our new CFO to the podium. Ms. Gwynn is going to present according to Iowa code. We need to have a treasurer report. And Ms. Gwynn we're happy to have you part of the team, excited. I know this is very nervous to come up and do a presentation. Mr. Arthur will only ask 10 questions, I promise. We will hold him to 10. But I am thankful to have you part of the team. I know you're digging in, trying to learn the Iowa way, and it is a lot different from the state that you came from.
Yep.
But we appreciate the work that you have begun. And I'm excited to see how the year ends up once you get everything under your belt.
Thank you.
So the floor is yours, Ms. Gwynn.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Murillo, and good evening, Board.
Good evening.
I would like to say I am super excited to be joining the Council Bluffs Community School District's team, and I am eager to learn the Iowa school funding. So I come from the state of Washington, just so you guys know, and I did work at a school up there. So this evening, I am going to present our 22-23 Treasurer's Report. Before I get started, I would like to remind everybody that the numbers I will be presenting tonight are before our audit and are possible to change. The first fund that I would like to talk about is our general fund. And we had projected a deficit of 1.2 in our budget for last year, and this year we ended up actually with a deficit of 4 million, roughly around 4 million. And the few items that I'd like to address around that $4 million deficit are our special education deficit, which came in around $2.2 million. And within that is transportation costs, supplies and equipment, and salaries and benefits. I was explained to me that we had moved some students from Canesville over to Heartland, and there was transportation costs that also involved kids going to Omaha as well. I can say that we are not anticipating this kind of deficit this coming year because the students are back at Canesville. Another point that affected that deficit is the reduction in our ESSER funding. We are coming to the end of that, and so those expenses are now starting to hit our main lines within our general fund. Also, an issue is inflation. As we all know, it definitely affects us in our personal lives. It also affects the school district. As I mentioned, the net deficit for the general fund came in around $4 million, and we have cash and investments that are around $27.7 million. And I can tell you that we do hold a healthy reserve. The next fund is our management fund, and that came in with a net deficit of $524,000. And the largest contributing factor to that was the payout of our sick leave, and also the increase in our property and liability premiums. The next fund is our health insurance fund, and within this we have a net deficit of $1.7 million, and that the contributing factor there was that we had higher expected claims within our health insurance, and we are holding a cash and investment position of $3.9 million. And I wanted to make note that the health fund cash reserve that the district holds is very important, that it helps us in case we have future unanticipated catastrophic claims that would come through. The next fund is our SAVE fund, which is our penny tax fund, and we have a net deficit of $69,500. And the contributing factor here is that we moved a little bit of money over to the Early Learning Center for construction costs, and we have a cash position of $7.2 million. And just because I haven't mentioned this, but all the net deficits are as of last year, so as of June. I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. Our PEPL fund, we have a net deficit of $1.9 million. This deficit was anticipated and was budgeted for. It was for our construction and remodeling costs. And we have a cash position of $4.9 million in that account. And then our last fund tonight is our nutrition fund, which is currently sitting with a net surplus. So I'm going to end on a positive note of $1.3 million, and that is due to our federal funds and an increased meal funding. And we have a cash position of $5.2 million. And that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions tonight? And
Thank you.
hopefully I can answer
Questions
them.
from the board? Troy?
Go for it, Troy.
It's over there.
Go ahead.
I'll jump in, Troy, and give you a break for a second. So, last year we talked about the deficit, and we made some hard decisions. Closing Crescent was one of them. The IB program. So we're at a $4 million deficit. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this properly.
Where's that at compared to projections?
Yeah, what contributed to that, and then and what is our goals to ensure that we're not going to have to make large cuts like we did last year?
So, Carrie, go back to the first slide for me. So the 2.2 that you saw for the special education, really what we're looking at there is we took, because we were renovating Canesville, we moved that school that was at Heartland over into Omaha. So we knew there would be a significant increase, but we also knew that if we left the students in Canesville and did the construction around, it would be 3 years, which would cost us more. The other piece that we had, and I mean, Dr. Matthews has about probably 15 bullets for me that shows what equaled up to the 2.2. So transportation into Omaha back and forth. moving our students and renting, so we had to rent that space to put them in. And then also, besides the work that we did with the students that were at Heartland, we also had a lot more students needing specialized programs, which you guys have, in the resolutions and in the consent, approved those sites. Those sites are so expensive. And so when we total up that, and that's a piece that we continue to really struggle and work through, is how long do we continue to take outside students into our specialized programs because of the cost? Now, do we get reimbursement? Can we get spending authority for that? Yes. But the deficit, I believe, for special education should decrease, since we're no longer transporting our students over into Omaha, and we're no longer having to pay for the rent of the space over there. And now that they are back into Heartland and in Council Bluffs.
So we do, I mean, a lot of those expenses for students do go back to that referring district, or,
Yes.
but are we seeing people moving into town then and being in district where?
There is some of both. We do get reimbursement. We bill the district, and the district then reimburses for that price. But it is still part of, if it ends in June, the reimbursement, sometimes it's in the
Misses
rear. And so I do believe that, I also know that as wages go up, more specialized paras are needed, more special education teachers are needed, that special ed fund is going to continue to grow. I mean, SLPs are going where we're outsourcing all of that through the AEA. We have a lot more needs for therapists and those type of
We had a
programs.
student for a long time that was over 100,000 a year.
That's correct. That is
Cost,
correct.
yeah.
But I can tell you, every student deserves the opportunity to be in public education. So it's our job and our obligation to service every student that it lives within our boundaries or would qualify for one of our programs. So we're hoping that we're going to watch that closely. I know that Dr. Matthews and Lori have already looked at and the bullet portion that we had when I said what happened. I also know that the reduction in the ESSER funds is going to continue to decrease our spending authority and continue to hit our bottom line, because now we're going to have to, let's say, with our preschool dollars, remember, we were banking those as we use ESSER dollars. Well, now we're going to have to withdraw those, which will decrease our spending authority, which is also going to impact how much we pay for now out of the general fund. So there were some things that we had put into ESSER that we moved back into general fund because we used the ESSER dollars to cover a few other things. And so there's a little bit of dollars left. We have $650,000 still banked for next year for our summer school. And summer school comes in right around $650,000 for the programs that we run. And all of that was setting in ESSER. It'll eventually have to come back into our general operating funds. So there is some pieces that, as we continue to look at, when we did our budget, we were looking at not a 3% raise. So that is a higher raise than, if you remember, the growth outcome that we had for the cost, it was at a 2%. The board decided to do a 3% raise for every employee in our district. That's a 1% that we had not done a projection for. So I know there's pieces like that that also came together as we began to look at that, but I do believe our staff, rightly so, deserved a 3% raise. And I appreciate the board for stepping up. Right now, what we'll have to do now is really look at enrollment, once that September last date comes, what that looks like, what the projections look like, and then we'll have to focus. And we could have cut some additional pieces that we decided, if you remember, board, we decided to hold. That is correct. Mr. Arthur?
Our nutrition fund has a pretty healthy balance now. And I think that's about what we spend a year
Yes.
on nutrition.
Or
Isn't it pretty close?
we're in the CEP.
Right, but I mean, that's about what the reimbursement was, I thought.
Yes, yes.
Is there another way to use those dollars, or a better way
No.
to use those dollars, or should we
No.
be providing a better
Because wouldn't it be
nutrition
nice?
services
It would
with
be
those
nice if we
dollars?
didn't have to pay for freezers that break down, that we could
Right.
use that, but we cannot. It has to come out of Pebble or Safe.
So is there a way to evaluate to make sure we're using those dollars wisely then, or
Yes,
should we use
Lisa
them
does-
better?
Lisa does a fabulous job.
I mean, instead of
Mr.
having like surplus is awesome, but
Yeah,
if we're getting reimbursed and we can't use the dollars, should we?
assets.
do something else with,
I don't know that you
Nutrition.
can. I think most of the funds, and one thing that Ms. Gwynn didn't mention is, once these funds are allocated for this funding source, you
Yes.
cannot commingle. I can't cross them over. It
no, but I
has
mean,
to
is,
stay.
can those dollars be, can we do more in nutrition? Can we do better? Can we do better,
we have a
better
grant
quality
for that.
foods? No.
For every single class.
Yes,
I'm just
we
saying,
do.
like, something
Yeah.
like that is what you're looking at.
Yes,
you know?
yes, and I can follow up. We can
Lobster
meet
for
with Lisa
lunch?
again.
I don't know if you could do one.
Oh, Mr. LaFurla. Mr. LaFurla thinks we could serve lobster one day. No, we cannot. But I can check with Lisa to see a little bit about that. I'm assuming that Lisa watches everything so closely, applies for every grant, got our whole district into community eligible program is what CEP stands for. And so since we are eligible for that and meet that criteria, every one of our schools, our students are able to eat for free. And so there is a lot of work that Lisa does to get all of these grants for our snacks, our healthy snacks, and that. I'm not sure what we can do with that 5 million, but it is an area, and that is all contributed to the leadership of Ms. Stewart.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Gwynn.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Dr. Morell?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, that brings us to our two resolutions. First is a resolution to rescind previous board approval to place language with the election officials on an extension of the voter-approved physical plant and equipment levy. Is there a motion?
I move that the board rescind the July 25th, 2023 board approved to place language with the election official for an extension of the voter-approved physical plant and equipment levy on the November 7th, 2023 election ballot.
Second?
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. And any discussion?
Yeah, so I thought we had discussed that we did not need to place this on the ballot, and we were just doing the 5-year extension.
No. Mr. Ostrowski's kind of been knee-deep into this for me. Do you want to take it? I can certainly take it and roll with it, but I'm not sure how factual I'll be.
The resolution passed by the board was to place it on the agenda, on the ballot on November 7th for the voters to approve a 10-year extension.
But we can go ahead as a board and approve it for a 5-year without vote?
No, we've already done that.
We've already
Already
done
done
that.
that.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and
Please.
then you correct me. And once Ms. Ostrowski sent this, because Dean was pulling this together, really, not till 2028 do we expire.
Oh.
And so, but Mr. Wilson was trying to get everything checked, and he gave us language, and I didn't check it, but it was the old language, and I didn't do my due diligence. So when we submitted it, we got a call back saying what the board approved is not the correct language to be on the ballot. So therefore, Allers then advised us to rescind it.
Got ya.
And he said, you can hold it till 2025, there's no rush. I think Mr. Wilson was just trying to protect the board and get this kind of checked off a list. So we need to rescind it, and then we can circle back to it. How many more elections do we have, Diane?
We have 25 and 27.
Yeah, so we have 2 more election cycles that we can place it on the ballot.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Ms. Ostrowski, please call the roll.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Ms. Shudak?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes, the motion has been approved. And lastly, we have a motion to set a public hearing on possible sale of the Warren Street property. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I could move the Board of Education Director, School Board Secretary to schedule a public hearing on September 26, 2023 at 6:30 PM on the dot to obtain public input regarding the possible sale of the Warren Street property.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. And would we like to discuss this any further? If there is a public hearing, there will be a full presentation at the public hearing on this before the board takes action. Ms. Ostrowski, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Ms. Shudak?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes, and the motion carries.
I'm trying to, a late thought. Thank you, Mr. LaFurla, for allowing me to make one more comment. I do want to wish good luck to our AL and TJ girls. The varsity girls are playing tonight for those bragging rights, so good luck to both teams. As you notice, Mr. Hamilton has disappeared from the crowd. His daughter is one heck of a volleyball player, so I wish him all the very best tonight.
And Friday is the football.
And Friday is our football night. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our business for the workshop meeting, but we do need to entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss the purchase or sale of real estate.
I can move that the board goes into closed session to discuss the purchase or sale of a particular real estate only when premature disclosure could be reasonably expected to increase the price of the governmental body would have to pay for the property or reduce the price the governmental body would receive for that property from Iowa Code 21.5, 1J.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
And any discussion? This is a roll call vote. Ms. Ostrowski, please call the roll.
Yes.
Mr. Arthur? Or who had the second?
Did you have this? I thought you
Well,
had.
I said it, but I think sure.
Oh,
But,
did
either
you?
one.
Okay.
Oh, I thought I heard Troy first.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
I suppose yes.
Mr. Kozire? Yes. Mr. LaFurla?
Yes. And the motion has been approved. We will move into closed session.
He threw his voice over here.
Aren't we?
Yeah, if I want to.